Good day and welcome to Advanced Ergonomics. My name is Theresa and I am an assistant professor with Montana Tech of the University of Montana. And today we'll be covering one of the most popular postural assessment tools available. And there's actually two of them. One is RULA, Rapid Upper Limb Assessment, and the other one is REBA, Rapid Entire Body Assessment Tool. And there's different methods, but we'll be using the paper method because we can all follow along. So simply you're going to learn how to conduct an analysis by going through and doing some, and then figure out how we're going to interpret the results together. I would recommend that you print off the RULA worksheets so that you can follow along as we're performing this basic analysis and teaching you how to use the postural tool. It is a subjective tool, meaning that you have to use your best knowledge of posture force when you're evaluating a given task. It was developed by Dr. Lynn McAtmey and Professor Nigel Corlett, both of whom are ergonomists at the University of Nottingham. Corlett has done extensive work in postural analysis. RULA looks at estimating the risks of work-related upper limb disorders. It gives you a very quick and systematic way to assess risk, and it can be used either before and after an intervention or after a worker has been hurt to demonstrate whether the intervention has lowered the risk of injury, or after a worker has developed a work-related musculoskeletal disorder. This might help you tease out which one of those 6 physical workplace risk factors are actually causing the issue to occur. And it can be used really for almost any task, although it works really well with tasks that are highly repeatable, or so they happen over and over again. So the task that you're looking at is in a commercial laundry, and this woman is folding towels. She folds hand towels as well as face cloths. So the first step is to locate the upper arm position and score it. And the way RULA works is when we look at our upper limb, if it's hanging naturally, this would be a 0-degree deviation. So if her deviation is less than 20 degrees forward and back, we would score it a +1. Greater than 20 degrees backwards, we would score it a +2. Between 20 and 45 degrees forward, a +2. 45 to 90 degrees forward, a +3. And 90 degrees or greater forward, and that would be a +4. Now just try to concentrate on the upper arm only and score it as you would. As well as then you can add extra numbers there if the shoulder is raised or the arm is abducted. So I scored this a +1 because it seemed this arm was hanging naturally at 0 or maybe less than 10 degrees. So then your second step in the evaluation is to locate and score the lower arm. And the lower arm would be, again, the distance from here to here. So is this person in what we consider the neutral posture between 80 and 110 degrees? Remember, 0 degrees is down here. Or are they between 0 and 80 degrees or greater than 100? That would be a +2. Or their arms farther away from their body than their midline. And so looking at that limb position, how would you score that person's limb? I scored it a +1 because the distance from here to here seemed to be pretty much within that 80 to that 110 degrees of deviation. Possibly 0 to 80 degrees. There you can put a goniometer or a protractor to measure it. But if you scored it a 2 or even a 2 and you thought they were further from midline, you added a 1 to it, making it a 3. Just score on your sheet as you see appropriate. Again, this is somewhat subjective, and 0 degrees is your neutral position. So our next step in the evaluation is we're going to take a look at the wrist posture as well as the wrist twist. So if the wrist is flat, we score this a +1. If we have minor deviations, either extension or flexion, no more than 15 degrees, that would be a +2. Severe extension or flexion deviation would make that a +3. And you can score either hand or the hand that's in the most extreme position. So we have a slight wrist deviation here, but especially because we know what the person's doing. They're folding towels, so they would be constantly deviating their wrists. Although they aren't twisting their wrists very much, they're not really at their end range of motion because they can control this motion somewhat. So here's where hopefully you are keeping track and you're able to see from step 1, you would choose the upper arm score, which is a 1. And then step 2, we choose the lower arm score, which was a 1. Our step 3 was our wrist posture score, and I chose a 2. Our step 4 was our wrist twist score. And where all these points come together, our final score for our upper limb, upper arm, lower arm, wrist, and wrist twist is a 2. And we'll save this because we need to enter it into the next part of the form. So we take our 2 and we put it here in step 5. And then we go on and we look at, for this particular portion of the body, so we're only looking at the upper limbs. We're not worrying about the rest of the body. We'll deal with that later. This is where we start to add in muscle force. So if the posture is maintained statically for greater than 10 minutes, or if the action is repeated more than 4 times per minute, we'd add a +1 for step 6. If the person is picking up less than 4 pounds, we don't add anything. 4 to 22 pounds, we add a +1. 4 to 22 pounds repeatedly or held statically, we'd add a +2. And more than 22 pounds repeatedly or with shocks, then we'd add a 3. And so because the postures are definitely held for more than 10 minutes and they are repeated for more than 4 times a minute, I added a 1 here to step 6. But the force is really low. And so our total upper limb score would be our 2 from the lookup table plus 1, our muscle strength score, gives us a total score here of 3. And we're going to need this, so if you're following along on your sheet, go to table letter C, and circle the 3, because we'll need that later, and this way you can have it. So I know we skipped table B, but we're going to go back and do that right now when we take a look at the rest of the posture. Okay, so now I'm on step 9, and we're looking at the deviation of the neck. So if we have no deviation, that's our ears are above our shoulders, it'd be a +1. So here's our shoulders, and here's her ear. Deviating 10 to 20 degrees, which is really your normal gaze forward, that's a +2. Deviating more than 20 degrees is a +3. If we're extending back, that's a +4. And then you can see you can even increase these scores if the neck is sideways bent or twisted. So because of the extreme posture there, I scored this a 3. I think you can pretty easily see that that would be a 3. So the next step, which is step 10, is we locate the trunk position. So here's our hips. What's the deviation from hip to shoulder? No deviation, shoulders are over the hips, that'd be a +1. Slight deviation forward, no more than 20 degrees, we have a +2. More extreme deviation, 20 to 60 degrees, we have a +3. See if we could see our line here. And then almost complete forward bending would be our +4. So I scored the trunk. Where would you score it? I scored it a 3. And since the legs are supported, one leg is supported there, then I scored that next step a 1. Okay, so now we're on table B, and that's why this is color-coded, because it makes it so much easier. Our neck posture was a 3. Our trunk posture was a 3. Our leg posture was a 1. And where all those come together, it results in a score of a 4. And so now we need this to move on to the next step in the analysis. We have our 4 right here, step 12, which we just got from our lookup table. And now we're looking at muscle loading for the torso, neck, and legs. The posture is held for greater than 10 minutes, and therefore I added a 1. But the loads are small. This person is only picking up towels, and therefore I didn't add anything in there. So our complete neck, trunk, and leg score is 4 from the previous table, 1 for our muscle score. 4 and 1 gives us a 5. So we already have our 3, which came from step 8. And now we have our 5, which came from our last step. And where the 3 and the 5 intersect, it gives us a 4. So it gives us a final RULA score of 4, meaning that this task needs some further evaluation. So RULA gives you an action level, basically a degree of urgency. An action level 1, or a RULA score of 1 to 2, means that the person is working in pretty much the best posture with minimal force or static loading. An action level of 2, or a RULA score of 3 to 4, means that the person is working in a posture that could present some risk of injury from their working posture. And this score most likely is the result of one or more body part being deviated. So that's something else you can use the RULA worksheet to do, would be then to go back and see what posture is actually driving up that RULA score. And if you remember, the neck posture and the torso postures were pretty extreme. An action level of 3, or a RULA score of 5 or 6, means that the person is working in a very poor posture with the risk of injury, and that we need to investigate this further, whereas an action level 4 means we need to investigate it immediately and put something in place to reduce the risk of injury. So I'm going to have you develop a RULA score for the man in the tan shirt. And hopefully by the time you get to this point in the lecture, I will have uploaded a video for you to take a look at, but I'm going to explain to you what's going on. So the worker in the picture is splicing traditional electrical cable that you would have either running underground or running above ground in your house. He uses wire, a splice connector, a crimping tool, utility knife, heat shrink wrap, a heat shrink wrap source such as a heat gun, and cutting wires. And the steps in the process, you can see them as follows. So you're going to take a look at Figure 2, which shows the start of the crimping process. The master electrician is in an awkward posture. His torso is leaning forward. One handle of the tool is compressed against his thigh. His upper arm is approaching shoulder height, and he's putting a great amount of force. We measured over 50 pounds of force on the handles. He must hold this posture for 4 times as he does all of the slices. So it's performed, he assumes this posture 4 times in the sequence of 9 minutes. So take a look at the posture that the gentleman in the tan shirt is assuming. Take your RULA worksheet and score the arms and wrist, lower arms position, upper arm position, wrist twist. Then calculate if any added muscle force is being used. Score the neck, the trunk analysis, and calculate your complete RULA score. And you can go to Moodle to see how we evaluated this particular task. And I have a video of this task too. I need to compress it, and I believe by the time you get to this lecture, I'll have it compressed for you. So see how you do. So we're going to go on to REBA now. REBA is the Rapid Entire Body Assessment Form. Again, it was developed by Dr. Lynn McNetney, and I see a typo there, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. I'll fix it. REBA is a postural targeting tool for estimating risks in the entire body. Again, it's quick and systematic and somewhat subjective. So again, this would be a good opportunity to get your REBA sheet. You can see that it's slightly less complicated than the RULA sheet. It is color-coded for your scoring pleasure. So the first step, so what you're looking at here are 2 Navy sailors, and they are pulling a rather heavy engine. The engine is in the 250-pound range. The concrete in which they're pulling it on is very uneven. And so we need to calculate their neck score. And you can see that they're having to extend their neck back, and therefore that would give us a neck score of 2. So the next step is the deviation in their torso position. And again, we know that 0 degrees would be if the hips were over the shoulders, and this person, there's their hips to their shoulders. You can see easily from the picture that this is a great deal of deviation, way more than 20 degrees, 60 to 90 degrees deviation. And therefore, that gives us a trunk score of 4. REBA Step 3 is to locate the lower leg posture. And if both legs are supported, it becomes a +2, as well as if the knees are bent. So here the knees are really straight, and both legs are supported. But I scored this a +2 because of the extreme knee deviation. So their knees are bent, not necessarily greater than 60 degrees, but they're putting a lot of force on their knees. So I took it upon myself to change the leg deviation to a +2. There's really a lot of pressure in the knees, and they would be bending their knees and then leaning back and pulling that engine with them. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so our next step, we need to determine our posture score. From step 1, we got a 2 for the neck score. From step 2, we got a 4 for the trunk score. And we got a 2 for the leg score. And when these all come together, it gives us a 6. And so we take that 6 and we bring it down and we use it to prep for the next step in the process. So the next step in the process is that if the load is greater than 22 pounds, we'd add a 2. And since the load is up in the 250 pound to 300 pound range, we add that 2, and then 6 plus 2 equals an 8. And we're going to circle this 8 because we're going to need that later. So now we move on to the limbs. And so we look at the deviation in their arms and wrist, or their upper arm and wrist, as well as their lower arm. So you can see that their arms are being held straight from the body, making their upper arm and their shoulders are probably elevated. So although they're not greater than 90 degrees, they were a 3, because their arms are greater than 20 degrees but below 45 degrees. Think about this: if they were standing upright, what would the position of the arm be? But because the shoulder is raised when they're doing this task, I added it together, gave them a 4. And then the location of the lower arm as well is straight out. It's not in that neutral position, it's straight out. And that would give a lower arm score of a 2 and an upper arm score of a 4. But certainly score it as you will. And as far as the deviations in the wrist go, you can see that the wrist is highly deviated, making that wrist score a 2. So now we use our table B. You go back and you look at your sheet, and our upper arm score was a 4. Our lower arm score was a 2. Our wrist score was a 2. Where these come together give us a 6. And we're going to use that in the next step. So we have a 6 from the previous step. We know that the coupling is absolutely unacceptable because they're holding on to an angular object. They're holding on to the edge of the transporter there. They don't have good handholds. So our 6 plus 3 gave us a 9. So we had an 8 from our posture and load score, and we just calculated a 9 from our arm and coupling score. We see this results in a 10, and we take that 10 and we put it right down here. And now we need to take a look at our activity score. So in our activity score, you can have as much as a 3. So you can add all these different scores together if you need to. So 1 or more body parts are held for longer than 1 minute, yes. Repeated small range of motions, no, not really. Action causes rapid or large changes in posture, yes. So for our activity score, that would be a 2. We add our 10 and our 2 together, and it gives us a 12. And we can see that this is a very high-risk task, and we need to do something immediately. So I hope you understand how to use RULA and REBA. The pictures are really helpful. Always trying to orientate that 0 degrees is your orientation from head to ground, and then we deviate from there. So please take a look at the video and see how you did in scoring the connector task. I hope you have a wonderful day.